There are moments where the veil is torn and night fully reveals itself. Moments where the unknowable tries to make itself known, and moments where your fear becomes so strong that it turns into something else entirely different. That feeling, like the horror that inspires it, is best left forgotten, because both are unnameable. I'm your host, Victor Evans, and I welcome you back to the Unnamable Podcast, where we discuss the weird, otherworldly, and increasingly strange events that happen here in my hometown, Arkham, Massachusetts. And today we have an unfortunate turn of events. If you remember, our last episode was sponsored by director Hildred Castaigne. We ran a brief ad for his upcoming play, The King in Yellow. Well, the show is set to debut next week, but now there's a great deal of controversy surrounding it. Arkham is being overrun by, well, for lack of a better word, tourists. All of our hotels are booked, and even Ma's boarding house is packed. Oh god, I hope someone warned them about the strangler. Okay. Now, this isn't a bad thing. Some of these people are thespians, and I've heard they're in the show. The King in Yellow has an unusually large cast. But people are coming from all over the East Coast just to see this play. Hell, I even met somebody that flew all the way out here from California. Isn't that nuts? Folks are treating this like it's some sort of Broadway show. Never thought I'd see that in Arkham. But not everyone's here to support our local arts. There's been a growing number of protesters outside of the Ward Theater. One of my editors counted 12 people yesterday, though I've been told that number's now closer to 20. That's right, spooky voice time, because no one's really sure why they're protesting. They're not talking to anyone. Instead, they're spending literal hours chanting the same exact phrase. Hold on, I don't want to butcher this, let me get the paper. Okay, they're saying, he is the spawn of Yog-Sothoth? Yog-Sothoth? Yog-Sothoth. He is the spawn of Yog-Sothoth. Now, we've done a little Google search and found absolutely nothing. It seems like no one's ever heard of Yog-Sothoth. I even turned to Reddit, but my posts were deleted for supposedly making little sense. So that's it, we're stumped. Do any of you know what Yog-Sothoth could be? The word spawn makes me think like father or maybe mother, but who's the he that they're chanting about? Castaigne? There's other evidence, though it's just as confusing. The protesters are holding boards with the phrase, "Have you seen the yellow sign?" Well, another Google search revealed nothing. It might as well all be gibberish at this point. That's relatively harmless so far, right? Wrong. One of the show's cast members, Miriam Derleth, has gone missing. She was last seen leaving the Ward Theater after a late rehearsal. For now, people are blaming the protesters, and because I've already heard rumors of them hounding the cast, I'm inclined to agree. But there's no evidence, so there's been no arrests, and Castaigne hasn't said a word. In fact, the only cast member to even remotely acknowledge Miriam's disappearance is actress Lola Hayes. Lola was originally going to play Casilda, one of the show's key characters. But just recently, she's announced plans to drop out of The King in Yellow, and I quote, "The play is a danger to Arkham and its residents. I've been uncomfortable with my role from the beginning, but it's only now that I've seen the real trouble that our show can cause, and I can in no way be a part of that. Director Castaigne has already been told, but this is my public announcement. I will not be appearing in The King in Yellow." It's sad to watch her go. I've seen a few of the posters they threw around town, and she looked absolutely stunning, in a haunting kind of way. It's bullshit. We can't let these people get to us, and our hearts go out to the Derleth family. We pray that Miriam is found soon. Look, and I'm speaking directly to the protesters here. I don't know what has you guys so riled up, but violence is never the answer. If you kidnapped that poor girl, let her go, because this is only going to hurt your cause, and we don't even know what that cause is. You people won't talk to anyone. But here's your chance. If any of you calmer protesters want to explain your problem with The King in Yellow, come talk to us, right here at the podcast. We'll give you an unbiased platform and a chance to speak your mind, but you better be ready to play ball if you come on air. I need a break. Alright, we're back. And I've calmed down, promise. The next thing I wanted to cover were reports of bizarre couriers. I haven't seen them myself, but apparently they come bearing strange messages, and on at least 4 accounts have delivered packages that people weren't expecting. There seems to be no connection between the folks they visited, and I've been told that one of these incidents took place in Kingsport, so this isn't restricted to Arkham. These couriers have a consistent description though. 4 different witnesses paint them as being wrapped in ragged cloaks and standing hunched over, reaching an estimated height of about 4 feet. One guy was able to glance under the cloak and says his courier looked like a plump white graveworm. I wonder how exaggerated that is, like, was it just a short pale fat dude or are we talking an actual giant worm? Either way, spooky voice. The items gained from these deliveries supposedly include a small tattered hand mirror, an old flute, apparently made of bone, a small red ruby, and get this, an old copy of The King in Yellow. Now we don't know if there's any connection between these worms and Castaigne's play, but it is a bit too coincidental. Hell, this could just be a convoluted way of advertising the show. I mean, it got us talking about it. Police are interviewing anyone that's encountered these couriers, so if you've met them, please contact Arkham PD. In fact, get a hold of us too. We'd love to share your story. You know, things are getting a little heavy here in Arkham, so we're going to end this episode by talking about an old local legend. Back around 1920, a linguist by the name of Harley Warren went missing. The story goes that Warren studied the occult and had a whole mess of ancient tomes in a multitude of languages. None of these books have ever been found, but it's said that Warren vanished after descending into the unknown. It took 2 days for Warren's wife to report him missing, and after questioning several witnesses, it was determined that local author Randolph Carter was the last person to see Harley Warren alive. It's said that Carter gave a total of 15 statements, and each of them were identical. But there wasn't enough evidence to hold him, so he was released, and Warren's disappearance was blamed on animals, though the police never revealed which kind of animal it was. Carter himself would eventually go missing. All that remains is a pile of unfinished manuscripts, a whole mess of ink, and one final transcribed statement. Let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, do you know what's going on directly beneath your feet? The world's hidden underground. Well, Carter told me, and I'm going to share that with you by reading the Statement of Randolph Carter. I repeat to you, gentlemen, that your inquisition is fruitless. Detain me here forever, if you will. Confine or execute me, if you must have a victim to propitiate the illusion you call justice. But I can say no more than I have already said. Everything that I can remember, I have told you with perfect candor. Nothing has been distorted or concealed, and if anything remains vague, it is only because of the dark cloud which has come over my mind. That cloud, and the nebulous nature of the horrors which brought it upon me. Again, I say, I do not know what has become of Harley Warren, though I think, almost hope, that he is in peaceful oblivion, if there be anywhere, so bless the thing. It is true that I have for 5 years been his closest friend, and a partial sharer of his terrible researches into the unknown. I will not deny, though my memory is uncertain and indistinct, that this witness of yours may have seen us together, as he says, on the Gainesville Pike, walking towards a big cypress swamp. At what, 11:30 on that awful night? That we bore electric lanterns, spades, and a curious coil of wire with attached instruments, I will even affirm, for these things all played a part of the single hideous scene, which remains burned into my shaken recollection. But of what followed, and of the reason I was found alone and dazed on the edge of the swamp next morning, I must insist that I knew nothing save what I have told you, over and over again. You say to me that there is nothing in the swamp or near it which could form the setting of that frightful episode. I reply that I know nothing beyond what I saw, vision or nightmare it may have been. Vision or nightmare, I fervently hope it was. Yet, it is all that my mind retains of what took place on those shocking hours after we left the sight of man. and why Harley Warren did not return, he or his shade, or some nameless thing I cannot describe, alone can tell. As I have said before, the weird studies of Harley Warren were well known to me, and to some extent shared by me. Of his vast collection of strange, rare books of forbidden subjects, I have read all that were written in the languages of which I am master, but those are few as compared with those in languages I cannot understand. Most, I believe, are in Arabic, and the fiend-inspired book which brought on the end, the book which he carried in his pocket out of the world, was written in characters whose likes I never saw elsewhere. Warren would never tell me just what was in that book. As to the nature of our studies, must I say again, I no longer retain full comprehension. It seems to me rather merciful that I do not, for they were terrible studies, which I pursued more through reluctant fascination than through actual inclination. Warren always dominated me, and sometimes I feared him. I remember how I shuddered at his facial expressions on the night before that awful happening, when he talked so incessantly of his theory, why certain corpses never decay but rest firm and fat in their tombs for 1,000 years. But I do not fear him now, for I suspect that he has known horrors beyond my ken. Now I fear for him. Once more, I say that I have no clear idea of our object on that night. Certainly, it had much to do with something in that book which Warren carried with him, that ancient book in undecipherable characters which had come to him from India a month before, but I swear I do not know what we expected to find. Your witness says he saw us at 11:30 on the Gainesville Pike, headed for a big cypress swamp. This is probably true, but I have no distinct memory of it. The picture seared into my soul is of one scene only, and the hour must have been long after midnight, for a waning crescent moon was high in the vaporous heavens. The place was an ancient cemetery, so ancient that I trembled at the manifold signs of immemorial years. It was in a deep, damp hollow, overgrown with rank grass, moss, and curious creeping weeds, and filled with a vague stench which my idle fancy associated absurdly with rotting stone. On every hand were the signs of neglect and decrepitude, and I seemed haunted by the notion that Warren and I were the first living creatures to invade a lethal silence of centuries. Over the valley's rim, a wan, waning crescent moon peered through the noisome vapors that seemed to emanate from unheard-of catacombs, and by feeble, wavering beams, I could distinguish a repellent array of antique slabs, urns, cenotaphs, and mausoleum facades, all crumbling, moss-grown, and moisture-stained, and partly concealed by the gross luxuriance of unhealthy vegetation. My first vivid impression of my own presence in this terrible necropolis concerns the act of pausing with Warren before a certain half-obliterated sepulchre, and of throwing down some burdens which we seemed to be carrying. I now observed that I had with me an electric lantern and 2 spades, whilst my companion was supplied with a similar lantern and a portable telephone outfit. No word was uttered, and without delay we seized our spades and commenced to clear away the grass, weeds, and drifted earth from the flat, archaic mortuary. After uncovering the entire surface, which consisted of 3 immense granite slabs, we stepped back some distance to survey the charnel scene, and Warren appeared to make some mental calculations. Then he returned to the sepulchre, and, using his spade as a lever, sought to pry up the slab laying nearest to a stony ruin, which may have been a monument in its day. He did not succeed, and motioned to me to come to his assistance. Finally, our combined strength loosened the stone, which we raised and tipped to one side. The removal of the slab revealed a black aperture, from which rushed an effluence of miasmal gases so nauseous that we started back in horror. After an interval, however, we approached the pit again and found the exhalations less unbearable. Our lanterns disclosed the top of a flight of stone steps, dripping with some detestable ichor of inner earth, and now, for the first time, my memory records verbal discourse. Warren addressing me at length in his mellow tenor voice, a voice singularly unperturbed by our awesome surroundings. "I'm sorry to have to ask you to stay on the surface," he said. "But it would be a crime to let anyone with your fragile nerves go down there. You can't imagine. Even from what you have read, and from what I've told you, the things I shall have to see and do. It's fiendish work, Carter. And I doubt if any man without ironclad sensibilities could ever see it through and come up alive and sane. I don't wish to offend you, and heaven knows I'd be glad enough to have you with me, but the responsibility is in a certain sense mine, and I couldn't drag a bundle of nerves like you down to probable death or madness. I tell you, you can't imagine what that thing is really like. But I promise to keep you informed over the telephone of every move. You see, I've enough wire here to reach the center of the earth and back. I can still hear, in memory, those coolly spoken words. And I can still remember my remonstrance as I seemed desperately anxious to accompany my friend into those sepulchral depths. Yet he proved inflexibly obdurate. At one time he threatened to abandon the expedition if I remained insistent, a threat which proved effective since he alone had the key to the thing. All this I can still remember, though I no longer know what manner of thing we sought. After he had secured my reluctant acquiescence in his design, Warren picked up the reel of wire and adjusted the instruments. At his nod, I took one of the latter and seated myself upon an aged, discolored gravestone close to the newly uncovered aperture. Then he shook my hand, shouldered the coil of wire, and disappeared within the indescribable ossuary. For a moment, I kept sight of the glow of his lantern and heard the rustle of the wire as he laid it down after him, but the glow soon disappeared abruptly, as if a turn in the stone staircase had been encountered, and the sound died away almost as quickly. I was alone, yet bound to the unknown depths by those magical strands whose insulated surface lay green beneath the struggling beams of that waning crescent moon. In the lone silence of that hoary and deserted city of the dead, my mind conceived the most ghastly fantasies and illusions. And the grotesque shrines and monoliths seemed to assume a hideous personality, a half-sentience. Amorphous shadows seemed to lurk in the darker recesses of the weed-choked hollow, and to flit as if in some blasphemous ceremonial procession past the portals of the moldering tombs in the hillside shadows, which could not have been cast by the pallid, peering crescent moon. I constantly consulted my watch by the light of my electric lantern and listened with feverish anxiety at the receiver of the telephone. But for more than a quarter of an hour, I heard nothing. Then a faint clicking came from the instrument, and I called down to my friend in a tense voice, apprehensive as I was. I was nevertheless unprepared for the words which came up from that uncanny vault in accents more alarmed and quivering than any I heard before from Harley Warren. He, who had so calmly left me a little while previously, now called from below in a shaky whisper more pretentious than the loudest shriek. If you could see what I'm seeing. I could not answer. Speechless. I could only wait. Then came the frenzied tones again. Carter, it's terrible, monstrous, unbelievable. This time my voice did not fail, and I poured into the transmitter a flood of excited questions. Terrified, I continued to repeat. Warren? Warren, what is it? What is it? Warren, what is it? Warren? Warren? Once more came the voice of my friend, still hoarse with fear, and now apparently tinged with despair. I can't tell you, Carter. It's too utterly beyond thought. I dare not tell you. No man could know it and live. Great God, I never dreamed of this! Stillness again. Save for my now incoherent torrent of shuddering inquiry. Warren, tell me what it is. What are you saying, Warren? Please tell me, Warren, what is it? Warren, answer me. Then the voice of Warren, in a pitch of wilder concentration. Carter, for the love of God, put back the slap and get out of this if you can. Quick, leave everything else and make for the outside. It's your only chance. Do as I say. Do not ask me to explain. I heard, yet was able to only repeat my frantic questions. Around me were the tomb and the darkness and the shadows. Below me, some great peril beyond the radius of human imagination. But my friend was in greater danger than I, and through my fear, I felt a vague resentment that he should deem me capable of deserting him under such circumstances. More clicking, and after a pause, a piteous cry from Warren. Beat it! For God's sake, put back the slab and beat it, Carter! Something in the boyish slang of my evidently stricken companion unleashed my faculties. I formed and shouted my resolution. Warren, brace up, I'm coming down. But at this offer, the tone of my auditor changed to a scream of utter despair. Don't! You can't understand. It's too late, and my own fault. Put back the slab and run. There's nothing else you or anyone can do now. The tone changed again, this time acquiring a softer quality as of hopeless resignation, yet it remained tense through anxiety for me. Quick. Before it's too late. I tried not to heed him. Tried to break through the paralysis which held me and to fulfill my vow to rush down to his aid, but his next whisper found me still held inert in the chains of stark horror. A pause. More clicking, then the faint voice of Warren. Nearly over now. Make it harder. Cover up those damn steps and run for your life. You're losing time. So long, Carter. Won't see you again. Here. Warren's whisper swelled into a cry that gradually rose to a shriek, fraught with all the horror of the ages. Curse these hellish things! Legions! Legions! My God! Beat it! Beat it! Beat it! After that was silence. I know not how many interminable aeons I sat stupefied. Whispering, muttering, calling, screaming into that telephone over and over again. Through those aeons, I whispered and muttered, called, shouted, and screamed, Warren! Warren, answer me, are you there, Warren? Warren! Warren! And then there came to me the crowning horror of it all. The unbelievable, unthinkable, almost unmentionable thing. I have said that aeons seemed to elapse after Warren shrieked forth his last despairing warning, and that only my own cries now broke the hideous silence. After a while there was a further clicking in the receiver, and I strained my ears to listen. Again I called down, Warren! Warren, are you there? And in answer, heard the thing which brought this cloud over my mind. I do not try, gentlemen, to account for that thing, that voice, nor can I venture to describe it in detail, since the first words took away my consciousness and created a mental blank which reaches to the time of my awakening in the hospital. Shall I say that the voice was deep, hollow, gelatinous, remote, unearthly, inhuman, disembodied? What shall I say? It was the end of my experience, and is the end of my story. I heard it and knew no more. Heard it as I sat petrified in the unknown cemetery in the hollow, amidst the crumbling stones and the falling tombs, the rank vegetation and the miasmal vapors. Heard it well up from the innermost depths of that damnable open sepulchre, as I watched amorphous, necrophagous shadows dance beneath an accursed waning moon, and this is what it said. Wow. Interesting if true. You know, they say that all legends have some basis in reality, so who knows how much of that was truly fictional. With Carter gone, I guess we'll never find out. But that's all we got for you this week. If you have any information regarding Arkham's or its surrounding areas' unusual events, comment below or tag us on Twitter at @in_otherworlds. We hope to see you next time, but until then, remember to face your fears before they become unnameable.